Hey there, everybody. I just want to take a second and I want to thank you for coming this far and just even pressing the play button. It truly means a lot that you're taking the time to listen to this. This podcast isn't going to be a gotcha moment. It's not going to be a place where we shit on mothers. So, the ladies that are tuning in, put down the pitchforks. We're good. Y'all go through childbirth, alright? No one's going to take that from you. I get kicked in the balls and I need to be out of work for the next 3 days. Alright? I get it. A lot of men struggle talking about their mental health. And I can tell you from experience, there's nothing harder than speaking up. You know, when you look at animals in the wild, you watch the Discovery Channel, you probably see it in your own house if you have pets and you breed them. The parents are always just naturally knowing what to do. You have to remember that we as humans are also animals. And it's an instinct that when you have a child, that feeling, that protection that you get overcome with, it's something. And it doesn't matter how old you are, it's a natural thing. You know, I can remember standing in the hospital. I get handed this little blanket, and there's this little girl just wrapped in a blanket, just looking up at me. Not even 30 seconds old. Wow. There's a picture that it's just me and the scrubs holding her up to the window for everyone to see. And there's a little teardrop just right there on my nose. But before that picture, there was one promise I made. That no matter what life looked like, I would always show up and I would always protect her. And that's just a natural feeling. You know, I feel like every father makes that promise. Those first few days in the hospital, you know, just learning what to do, changing the diapers, you know, this responsibility. God, you turn in the trading cards and the video games, and all of a sudden you have a human. But then you get those quiet moments where you're laying down because you're exhausted and you're just trying to shush her. And she falls asleep and you fall asleep. And it's just so peaceful. And it's just so natural. And that's just the spiritual bond that happens with mother and fatherhood. You know, I remember the time came and the hospital stay was over. Um, I didn't go home with her. At the time, we lived in separate houses, me and her mother. And I tell you, it's a really weird feeling kissing your child, buckling her up, taking the pictures of going home, posted on Facebook. She's going home. And then you ever see the scene of Fast and Furious at the end with Paul Walker? And they go the separate ways. Bingo. You know, a couple days in the hospital and it's there, you're there, and it's gone. And a lot of fathers, you know, do go through this. And it's a silent battle. Because it's new. You don't know what this feeling is. But you figure it out and you make it work, right? After about 2 to 3 weeks, Juliana and her mother moved in with me and my dad and my mom. That was an awesome moment in my life because now it's back. The thing that I was missing, that I couldn't explain, that feeling, it's back. You know, from every shitty diaper, everyone loves telling the story that I threw up. Yep. Clap, loud of applause, whatever. Round of applause. The first blowout diaper went up Julie's back into her hair, and I rolled her over, and yep. But I owned it, you know? It's a memory. It's an awesome memory. Because it was my responsibility, and I cleaned it, and I took care of it, and I made her happy and laughed. And even though I was suffering, she smiled. It's parenthood, right? You make sure the kid is always happy. So tensions grew. This is all new. There's a newborn baby. My parents are older. You know, I'm still young. Her mom's still young. We're working all the time. You know, trading off. We're just exhausted. And I will own this. I have to own it. Let me tell the truth. I am the reason for the breakup. So this podcast, like I said, isn't going to be a gotcha moment. It's not going to be a shitting on mom's moment. I'm the dad that broke up with her. But all because I broke up with her doesn't mean I broke up from being a dad. And I did not deserve the battle that followed. You know, when Julie was at the house, everything just felt natural. From bath time to the giggles to the naps, every little thing was just natural. You went out to work, you provided, you came home, the family was there. It was natural. That fatherhood feeling was there. Until one day you go to work, after a bad fight, you say, get out, you don't understand, you kick her out, and you come home from work and the room is empty, the crib is empty. So that's on me. And then that darkness came back, you know? After a couple months of diapers and baby supplies and everything in this small, compact room, you just walk in and it's empty. And you're not sure how long it's going to stay empty. You know, I still remember the moment I found out that Julie was going to be born. NHL 13, second period. I was up by 3 against a computer. I was skating into their zone and my phone rings. Pick up the phone. Hello? Oh, you're late? Still trying to score that goal, score the one-timer, you know? I'll just take a pregnancy test, you know? We'll see what happens. Oh, you did? Oh, you're pregnant? Yep. Yeah, I'll let you go. Bye. Put the phone down. Finish the game, right? And then I do what every guy does. I text my best friend. And I text him and say, I'm going for a walk. That walk was a 2-mile walk to his house. And he walks down his walkway, and he goes, Boyo, what you do? What you do, tell me. And I said, I got her pregnant. Oh, God, the reaction. But I said, we're going to figure it out. And he was like, let's do it. You know, let's go on this adventure. You know, I was 19. I was young. Julie was born when I was 20. But finding out, I remember being so afraid to tell my parents. I got my dad a cheeseburger at this cheeseburger place at the mall that he wanted to try, and we're pulling out of the parking lot, getting onto the highway, and I go, "Hey, Dad, Mary's pregnant. How do I tell Mom?" And he looks at me and goes, "You don't." Goes, you better be shitting me." And I said, "Nope." And he said, "All right, we figure it out. Your mom's not gonna take this kindly, but we're gonna figure it out." And then we ate our burgers. It wasn't optional though, fatherhood. I still can't understand to this day how I hear stories about fathers who just, "Oh yeah, this kid's coming into the world. See you later." Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. It wasn't optional, It was a part of me now. It mattered showing up. Providing wasn't negotiable. You know, this little human, this vulnerable, squishy thing that if it falls from just 2 feet, it could die. That was your responsibility, and you'll do whatever it takes to protect it. I was working a job, handling military duties, doing whatever it took to feel like I was doing enough. I remember there was one time where overtime was offered at the supermarket I worked at, and it was the blizzard of 13 or 14 where we just got pounded with snow. Everything was shut down. And I was walking, snowbanks are higher than me, the blizzard's coming down. I remember the fire department driving their ladder truck by. They're the only people on the road. It was like 6:30 in the morning. And here I am walking to work for the overtime to go make sure there's not expired shelf goods. By the way, check your supermarkets. We found like 3 carriages worth of baby food that was expired. That's disgusting. Um, but that was it. You went out, you made the money, you provided. You know, you didn't get state assistance. You didn't get help. You were just figuring it out. Now, when I say you don't get help, we had a great support system with my parents. When I say we, I mean me and Julie, by the way. I just need to clarify that. They were a blessing I didn't know I need, especially because biologically I was not theirs, and they stepped up. It goes from trucking the work in a blizzard to standing in front of a lawyer and a judge trying to figure out what's going on. Child support hits really quickly. And I couldn't afford a lawyer. Law talk is really scary when you're a 20-year-old kid, let me tell you. What I didn't understand at that time, though, was how quickly the system tightens. Between child support, taxes, more than half my paycheck was gone before I even saw it. In the eyes of the law, they felt like they had to hold me responsible. They had to order me to be responsible. I wasn't trying to escape responsibility. I just wanted to be a dad. We got Wednesday to Saturday of every other week. That was the time allowed in the beginning. Between working 2 jobs, only having her for, basically a single day off, which would be Saturday, and then having to have her ready to be picked up at 6 p.m., I think it was. It wasn't easy. But you just figure it out. all of this figuring out, I wish there was an answer. You know, how does a young father who's got to work 2 jobs, between having his check taxed, between child support coming out, being left with barely nothing to get by, how does he defend himself when the very system he is in is consuming what little he has? I really wish I had an answer, but all I could do at the time was survive it. And at the time, it really didn't feel like you were going to ever survive it. But you will, brother. I promise you that. I can tell you so many times where I would get into work at 7, work till 4, get on a train, go to Boston, to work at the TD Garden for the Bruins or the Celtics games until the game ended and the last customer was out of the store. Get home around 11:30 during the work week and just fall asleep and do it all again. And then that weekend time that you would have with this little, your child, you're just exhausted. Can't keep your eyes open. You're on the couch getting yelled at to stay awake. Spend time with her. She's only here for a couple more hours. God, I know at the time I was like, I'm so exhausted, Mom. I need you to let me sleep. But I wish I could tell her how much I appreciate her slapping me and keeping me awake. Because those were some awesome moments, I remember. And then that Saturday would end. I couldn't have Sunday, by the way. That was in the court order. I couldn't have Sunday because Sunday is God's day, and I didn't believe. So because I wouldn't bring her to church, the court agreed that I shouldn't have her. Okay. I feel like I've been to church more in the last couple weeks than she did ever, but hey. But that Saturday would come, and it was right on a motorcycle. Right on a motorcycle, and I was out riding for hours. That was therapy. I'm not going to lie to you. I stayed busy. I worked my butt off. I got into a routine. Work, routine, responsibility. Work, routine, responsibility. And I use routine as a bridge because when I say routine, I mean when I'm supposed to be still. I just avoided being still. I avoided the quiet. I met some of my best friends through motorcycles. I remember when Julia was born, sitting in college, I knew I wasn't, I wasn't going to be sticking around. I had to go work. I had to go provide. College wasn't my thing, so I dropped out. Not going to lie to you. Probably wouldn't have been accepted back because my grades sucked, but that's between you and me, all right? Sorry for that. My water is out. I remember sitting in one of my college classes. The Army gave me a $1,500 check. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Mind you, this was for college books and stuff. Nah, I bought a motorcycle, this beat up, small 250. And everyone called it a midlife crisis because I was having a kid. And this was a panic thing. But the reality is I bought it to see my kid. Because at the time, we weren't living together. And my mom had a car and my dad had a car. I wasn't allowed to have a car because our driveway was only allowed 2 people or 2 vehicles. So I got a motorcycle. That was going to get me to and from my child. Mind you, I didn't know that they were going to be moving in, a couple weeks after she was born because of yeah, life happens. But yeah, to me, that was my life. That was my thing. That was going to be the way I see my daughter. Little did I know that thing would save my life during the quiet times. And the people I met through that hobby. I'm sure you guys are all listening because there's a lot of people that are waiting for this episode, whether they actually hear the message to watch me get canceled. You're going to cancel my Pokemon collection? Come on. Or just see me just completely faceplant this. Maybe some people think I'm, here to do drama. I'm here to throw shots and say my gotchas. Nah, this isn't it. But the people I met through that motorcycle community, let me tell you, for better or worse, they were a family. When Julie wasn't there, we always stayed busy, from long night rides out. You know, I won't deny it was a lot of fun, going out, being free, group of guys and gals, just riding bikes through the streets of Boston at 2 a.m. Get home, fall asleep, wake up, do it all again, then repeat the cycle. But that was the escape from the quiet. And like I said, I won't deny it was a lot of fun, but it's what kept the quiet at bay. Because when the quiet crept in, it wasn't fun. There's a couple people, and I know they're listening right now, that are in the motorcycle community. Actually, you know what? I can't even say there's a couple. There's one person in the motorcycle community, and I hope you're listening, brother. Through everything, he was there. I remember one day, God, he risked his life for me. A good friend of ours passed away from cancer, and his funeral ride was taking place down in Quincy, I want to say it was. And it was the same day as one of our court hearings. I begged and pleaded to just move the court hearing so I could do his last ride. And as you motorcycle people, if you're out there, you know that last ride matters. Needless to say, we went down to Quincy on our bikes. I think the funeral of the ride started at 9. We had court, I think, at 11:30. That was our hearing time. We went down there, rode for halfway through. I gave him a signal, looking at every last minute I could. And then we made our way to Manchester, New Hampshire. From Quincy. 2 motorcycles. That's all I'm going to say about that ride. God bless you, brother. But I will say this is the one time I lost my cool in the courtroom. Because that was the day I realized that court is, it's a place where claims can be claims, and sometimes they could be heard and taken as truth. I don't think I'll ever forget the time I heard the words, "There's bruises in unexplained places that are hidden." Oh, oh, I laugh because anyone who knows me knows it's just never a possibility. And that really intensified the quiet. Because I realized that lies could be truth. And it didn't matter because money bought silence. And those lawyers earned their money, I'll tell you that. I needed to distance myself. I was still in the military at the time, and I signed up for everything. Boy, did I. CLS class, 2-week trainings that were mandatory, but also trying to sign up for other people's just to get away. Best warrior competition volunteers to go help out and just, you know, be the grunt and clean everything and drive people places. But it was busy, it was structured, it was safe. Because when I was left alone, those thoughts weren't. You ever see, let's reference back to the animal comment. Everyone sees the happiness. Everyone sees the videos of the dogs and the puppies and the kitties and, the lions protecting their cubs and all that fun stuff. But how many of y'all actually watch the sad videos where the cub goes missing and the parents and the lion can't figure out what's going on? And they're freaking out, and you see it in their body language, and everything changes. And you, as a viewer, watch that, and your body changes. You get that remorse. You're like, oh my God, I hope this cub is found. Oh my God, let this video have a happy ending. Put yourself in that lion's shoes and think what he's thinking. And I can tell you right now, that's how a lot of fathers feel. They're just hoping for that happy ending. When the happy ending did come, though? On those days where you wake up and the crib is full. Or the nights where you put her down to sleep and she stands up and just looks at you over the crib and starts bouncing. And all you can do is sit there and roll over and tell her, go back to sleep. No. Honey, please go back to sleep. It's late. No. And you pick her up, you put her down, tuck her in, you just give her a little bit, and she falls asleep. That's when the quiet wasn't there. That time I had with Julie. Yeah, it was a lot. Every other Wednesday to Saturday, if you want to call that a lot. But it was 4 days. You spend 3 days working, having your parents take care of her. Some sure good quality time, right? It wasn't a choice. I remember I switched my shifts to 3 o'clock instead of 4 because I wanted to be able to go home and just sit on the floor for a half hour. And that half hour with Juliana would be the battery recharge I needed to get back in the car and drive to that train station. But again, the time with her was great, but the time away from her was not. And every time I had her, things felt so good that I just assumed in good faith. It became my catchphrase from, you'll figure it out, to, one day it won't be like this. No matter what argument happened, no matter what BS excuse I was fed on why I can't have an extra 30 minutes, no matter how many times the court order says was told to me, I knew one day it wouldn't be like this. And every single person that looked at me in all my journeys and went, how are you sane right now? Because I just kept saying, one day it won't be like this. And I believed it. Sometimes false hope is good hope, but I truly believed it. I believed one day Julie would be able to speak for herself. At the time, I told myself that cooperating was just the best thing to do. Just stop arguing, stop putting up fights, stop proving your points. Because at the end of the day, the system backed mothers. Couldn't afford it. You can't afford to make changes to the parenting plan. You're just a single dad. You're working 2 jobs. You're barely surviving. And you're fighting a lawyer that you're funding with child support. You're paying, essentially, to disassociate yourself from your child's life and to be silenced. But boy, did I believe. And I'll tell you, my mom always said it too. She said, one day, it won't be like this. Believe it or not, y'all will both come together and do what's best for the kid. Told her she was dead wrong. Boy, she believed. Now, I could go on and on and on about the petty fights, the worded documents that were used so perfectly down to the T and the time. You ask for an extra half hour. Nope, this is what the court order says. The court order, the court order, the court order. It's very important right there, the court order. And that was life. Up until I finally managed to get that one volunteer mission that changed them all. Deployment came. Leading up to deployment, I reached out and I said, hey, listen, this is happening short notice. I volunteered. I can't afford to do court. Can we be civil and work this out for while I am overseas? There's some sort of agreement in place for me to be able to communicate with Juliana, for my family to be able to see Juliana, to be able to still be a part of her life and not be leaving. It just kept getting like a can kicked down the road, passed along and passed along, until one day, just like in the hospital, put this little girl in a car seat, kissed her head. I said, Dad's got to go to work. I'll be back. I promise. But Dad's got to go to work. She didn't know what that meant, She thought that meant going to the supermarket. Closed the door, and I remember just saying, are we good? And being told, yeah, I wouldn't do that. We're good. First month of the deployment, things were smooth. I was able to FaceTime, read books at night. My family could talk to her. And it was starting to sink into Julie that, Dad's going to be away for a little bit, but everything's fine. Wheels up, wheels down in the Middle East. And I am officially out of the country. Mike has left the country. Service is rough for the first couple weeks. We're working on getting our Wi-Fi set up, our personal little... If anyone's ever had, a cell phone plan where you're on minutes, they suck. But essentially that's what we ran on to, power our phones. And when it finally started up, boy, did things change. Christmas came around, or the beginning of December. I was like, hey, I think we're about... No, I'm sorry, I'm going to backtrack. It started sooner than that. There was little things here and there where it was like, hey, can we plan to see Juliana this day? And I'm speaking on behalf of my parents. And it would get, pushed to the side or said, oh, we can't do it, or whatever it is. And then one day it circled back to the golden rule. The court order. The court order says that Michael will pick up Juliana at this time, at this location. Michael is not in the United States. Therefore, Michael cannot pick up Juliana. Therefore, I don't have to do anything. At one point, I remember being told, if you piss me off, you won't even video chat until you get home. And we were still 5 months out from getting back to the United States. I tried and tried and tried so hard before I left to avoid this situation, because I knew it was going to happen from all the times prior before I left. That court order. It's like the Holy Bible. I remember there was a giant fight for Christmas. Boy, just being told no. No, you can't see your kid. No, you can't video chat. No, your parents can't see you. Just being told no. And knowing that that just isn't right. I didn't think my voice could become any more silent than what it had been prior. Deployment showed me that my voice can get really, really, really quiet, no matter how hard I yell, because the court order. Who would have thought that the mission overseas would be the easy part in all this? But she was right. There was no physical way for me to be present. And I could barely even speak to my child because she had a fight with her husband and was in a bad mood. The silence was undeniable. And all of a sudden, the quiet was back. And just when you think it can't get any worse, right? Find out around Christmas that your mother's breast cancer is back. Spent a lot of nights on the roof of my building where I was out of, just staring up at the sky in the desert, wondering what the hell is going on. But I'll tell you, it didn't break me. It really didn't. It took things from me. It took my trust for people. It took my hope that things can be good, you know? What did I do to deserve this? Why is all of this happening to me? All of this, wow, across an ocean away from your support people. I'll tell you, I fell in love with the game of poker when I was deployed. Joined a poker club, played all the time. And instead of motorcycles, it was poker now, you know? Got a bunch of soldiers who ain't doing shit sometimes. You gotta pass the time. It's 120 degrees out. You're not going outside. And you just play poker. You get that community like the motorcycles. And it was a great time. And just like motorcycles, we played every day we were off. Any day I wasn't at work, where I had the shift off. And I gotta thank those guys. Because just like the motorcycles got me through being at home, those poker guys, appreciate you guys. Boy, I remember coming home so excited. And I thank God that being able to surprise Juliana at Canopy Lake Park wasn't a fight. Because if it would have been a fight, I think that would have been where my bridge collapsed. But it doesn't matter because I was home. And that court order says that Michael has to be in the United States, and Michael is in the United States. And I realized I really can't be that quiet anymore. But I realized that silence is sometimes the biggest killer. But the parts of me that this whole thing took from me, like I said, it didn't break me, but it took a lot from me. And I just hated the world. When I say hated the world, I don't mean I hated everybody, just to be clear. I hated the feelings that came with it. I hated the silence that was so loud. I hated the court order. That Holy Bible, that court order. Hated it. But Canby Lake Park came. And I remember being behind stage texting my beautiful wife. You guys out there? Yeah. Being behind the curtain with all the characters and stuff. And they're like, oh, do you want to peek? Do you want to see her? No, I don't want to do that. Going out on that stage. Having her turn around. This silence. And then the loudest "Daddy" you will ever hear. And that embrace. Boy, I didn't let go. And just like when I was working 2 jobs, and I came home for that half hour and got that hug, and it was a recharge to my battery. Everything from deployment, every mental battle did not matter. It was recharged. Broken, but recharged. When I came home, after being recharged like that, staying quiet, like I said, was no longer an option. I focused on building and producing something out of this pain. And that's when I learned, like I said prior, silence is the real killer. The problem that I face now is still the same. That court order. There was never any extra time. There was never a moment where the court order wasn't brought up. And again, it's like that holy Bible, you know? This is law. This is the word of law. And as loud as I got, that court order was still my silencer. And it was always able to blow the fatal blow to every single request. So I knew what I needed to get done. Needed the court order to change. So we started saving every single exchange, every petty text message, every time there was an issue that didn't need to be an issue, every manipulative word that was said, and the binder got big. But I'll tell you, no matter how big the binder got, there was nothing more motivating than sitting in a mall in Colorado on vacation and your daughter looking at you and saying, "Dad, I just want more time with you. It's not fair." You ever get throat punched and you're just like, crap, what do I say now? It's a kid, you know? Kids don't belong in adult things. And all I could say was, you have to talk to your mom. It's not up to me. You gotta talk to your mom. And she said, okay. It's my kid. All right, give me the phone. Tries to call. No answer. All right. Just text her mom. Mom, I want more time with Dad. I know you think this is him, but it's Julie typing. And she went on, a kid paragraph that I can't recall all of it. She pressed send. So, kid's got some balls on her. All right. Sitting there waiting for the text back, waiting. We'll talk about it when you get home. Julie's like, no, I want to talk about it now. Well, we'll talk about it when you get home. Of course, that conversation never happened, but whatever. But hearing those words, you realize this is bigger than me. It's just about to get real big, because watching her voice get silenced, just like mine had been all these years, after everything me and her have been through, that father-daughter bond that was kept apart, not because I was a poor dad, but because we weren't friends. Really? And this is where my turning point took place. And no matter what it took, no matter how much money it cost, her voice was going to be heard. Now, I'm not going to go into detail right now and explain the court battle and what's going on in it, and the evidence that was thrown and the evidence that was fabricated, and 2 court hearings we had. Psst. No, I'll tell you, clearly the court hearings went in a very favorable direction. I'll never forget the moment I got the phone call from my lawyer in the big hearing. The end-all, be-all custody hearing. I was walking up the steps of this hotel in Boston working at an armored car company. Halfway up the steps, I see the phone call from my lawyer. Same time I get the email from him saying, here is the results. And I just couldn't even get words out of my mouth. I just said, did we win? Did we win? Did we win? Tell me we won. Did we win? He chuckled and he goes, we won. Congratulations. And I just collapsed in the stairs. Just sat on the stairs at this busy Boston 5-star hotel crying my eyes out. And I just couldn't believe it, Thousands and thousands of dollars, hours of work, years of pain, It's all over. I couldn't call Julie fast enough. I won't lie. I called her and I said, Julie, we won. I got yelled at for that, of course. Dare you tell her we should have done it together, blah, blah, blah. No. No, no, no. This was me and Julie's moment. You were not taking it. I was not going to allow it. And Julie was confused at first. You know? But she learned what was really going on and what the schedule was going to be, and that she was here 50% of the time, and it felt right. It all just felt, the universe just connected, you know? You went from an every other weekend father in 2 weeks in the summer to 50-50. Now, child support was still a thing, which we will discuss further down the line in other episodes, and how child support is not for present fathers. I can assure you it's no longer a thing, which is it. You know, that was it. That was the last thing that child family court had on me. And that ended as of recently with agreement from her mother, because, you know, we finally realized that it just was too complicated as Julie got older. And it really wasn't there to help. It's just there to be another formal thing that the court has to check off their box. So that was it. Child court was over. As of a couple weeks ago, and that's what really gave me the confidence to tell the story. There's a lot I haven't covered, but it will all come out through other episodes, through other dads' stories. But I can tell you that for the dads out there that don't think right now you can get through what you're going through, do it for them. If not for yourself, do it for them. Do it for the kids. Do it for your kid. Never stop. Never just be silent and take a step aside. I'm glad my daughter spoke up in Colorado. She showed me what bravery was that day, I'll tell you that. And from that moment forward, we played our cards close to the chest. You know, I'll talk more in detail in later episodes, like I said. But the outcome, it was our outcome, you know? You know, the story of fatherhood doesn't just abruptly stop. It's a book that just keeps on writing, page by page. Because every day you figure out something new. And I'm just glad that my story, it's not finished, you know? I have so many years and so many memories now where I can make those memories and make those moments. And I never have to hear the words, the court order, again. I'm finally able to tell my story. Now, I will say, life today looks completely different. We're a couple years past the court decision. Things have fallen into place. Julie's fallen into her amazing routine. She has an amazing support system. And while no co-parenting relationship is perfect, you know, we put Julie's best interest first. And if we don't, Julie lets us hear it. Now, I've gone on record a ton of times, and I have always said, I've always believed a strong bond between a mother and daughter matters. I've said it so many times that I would never in my life do to her mother what was done to me. Because it just goes against us as a species, you know? And it all just circles back to where animals, and we have the feelings and we have the instinct. And when you take that instinct away and you can collapse someone's whole world, you know? And I believe every parent, if it doesn't work out, should still receive 50-50. That should be the standard. Now, unless there is clear evidence that this child is at risk, there shouldn't be a standard that works against the fathers. Because currently in the system, that's exactly what happens. Don't just take my word for it. Take the dads that will be on this show, that will be able to speak, finally, to have a place that they can tell their story. And I want to put a challenge out there for everyone who's come this far. Everyone's got a man in their life. A husband, a father, a brother, a best friend. I want you to do me a favor. The next time you're with them, just look at them and ask them this one question. Are you okay? When you have a man caught off guard with that question, you might be surprised what comes out. And every dad that's out there, not even a dad, any man that's out there listening to this right now, that's made it this far, if someone asked you that question, be honest with yourself. How would you respond? Just start being honest, guys. Because it's not a burden that you should carry alone. You know, this podcast, it might not make a difference. It might make a difference. If it makes a difference in one person's life, if one person hears this and goes, I can relate, and it gives them a motivation or that spark to do something, to make a change, to be a better dad, to fight a little bit harder, then I'm all right with that. I want this podcast to be a place where fathers can speak truthfully and finally step out of the quiet that they have been trying to escape all these years. Now, you've heard me mention my motorcycle friends. You've heard me mention my poker friends on my deployment. You know, all those people that got me through the quiet. My parents who helped me when I was just trying to figure it out and stay alive. But I have one person who has been through this entire uphill battle with me. And I want to dedicate... She's going to hate me for this. I want to dedicate this episode to my beautiful wife. All the years of picking me up off the floor, all the tears you dried, all the times we both got really, really pissed off with the situation. You always told me, why aren't you being louder? Why are you letting her walk all over you? Why are we letting this happen? And I always just responded like I did with everyone else. One day it won't be like this. And I truly don't think the day would have came. I wouldn't have been able to keep up the fight alone. Because going through life as a one-man army, it gets exhausting. And the quiet will win. So if you've made it this far into the podcast, and I know you hate listening to things that are longer than 30 minutes, I just want to say thank you to my beautiful wife. Because of you, I'm able to sit here at my desk and pick up this microphone and tell the story. And let it be a happy story with a happy ending. There's no more quiet. There's no more dark. You came in with music and a light, and you kept me going. Like I said, if this podcast makes a difference, great. If it doesn't, it made a difference to me because I was able to tell my story. I was able to tell my story, and it wasn't cut off by those 3 awful words. And hopefully one day, the system will be at 50-50. And fathers won't have to hear those words. And they'll be able to do what they want. And that's just be with their kids. Don't get me wrong, there's so many deadbeats out there, and it makes me sick. But for the ones that are trying, the ones that are tired, this is a place for you to sit down and rest. This is the Unsilenced Father, where fathers tell the truth.